Welcome y bienvenidos to this episode of the Cultural Capacity Podcast. I am your host and teacher for this episode, Justine Gonzalez. We're going to hop right into the topic, which I'm very excited about. We're going to talk about perceptions. Now, what is perception? Let's start with a common definition. And here at the podcast, I like to go really deep with one particular question. And this episode's question is, what is perception? Why does it matter? Why is it important? If you hear a little background noise, it's my little puppy. It's early morning. Just got in from watering plants and being outdoors, and she's behind me. So welcome. Okay, so I am first let's ground us in the common definition of perception. And perception is simply nothing more than just how we see, hear, or become aware of something through our senses. And if you look into a dictionary or the common, like a thesaurus, to see the common words, the words that you see are things like discernment or recognition, realization, cognizance, etc. So when I hear that definition of perception, that ability to see, hear, or become aware of something through the senses, let's think about our senses, our sense of smell, our sense of sight, our sense of sound and hearing, our auditory senses, our sense of feeling, our sense of, I think I said taste and touch, right? Feeling. I might be missing some, but you get the idea that, as humans, I think one of our most challenging things is to actually integrate all of our experiences and how that informs our decision making, and actually making time for going inside, introspection, to actually analyze a multitude of what we've taken in a particular situation. So I say all that to say, we often zone in on one key thing about a friendship or a partnership or a job situation, etc. One incident or one conversation or one comment that somebody makes, and I am guilty of doing the same thing. I think it's part of human nature. But we might have a particular reaction or something hits us a certain way about someone, and we tend to fixate on that. And we forget that our perception is actually made up of a collection of different experiences in that particular setting, situation, partnership, etc. So one of the things I wanted to do today on this episode is to share one of our tools that we use with a lot of our client portfolio here at Educator. Ooh, okay. Good morning. Good morning from my dog. Hang on. But one of the things, she sees birds outside, so she gets excited. So one of the things though, and you can see a lot of nature throughout this as well, because like the rings of a tree trunk or the roots, there's so many things we can take away from understanding our perceptions and that intersection with culture. So the tool that I'm displaying right now, so if you're just listening to this, you might want to hop over to YouTube to watch the video if you want to see this. If not, you want to also be sure to check out all of the resources linked below for anything that might be aligned as resources to help you through this episode. So what I'm showing though is just a one-pager of one of our tools that we call the Continuum for Leading Cultural Conversations. Again, this is an internal tool that my team has developed over the past 4 years and have now been, I think this is like version 4.0. We have a complete guide that actually breaks down how to use this as well. But you can see at the bottom, we have 5 different words in like just smaller text, very simple in black and white. Often when I'm working with clients, whether they're individuals or organizations, they are fixated on those things at the bottom, and they're saying, how can I move forward? What's the advancement? Or how can I change my actions? Or how can I change attitudes, etc. And we often fixate on those outcomes versus understanding that what I see right here and the U circle that I'm pointing to, the yellow, there's this whole other story behind you that a lot of people don't know about, right? Your own perceptions, we're not inside each other's heads. We live in a world with 8 billion perspectives, right? So 8 billion people, And we're all experiencing things very differently through the filter, so to speak, that is our own perceptions. And that is informed by our senses, how we experience the world, how we experience life, relationships, love, conflict, stress, emotions, etc. And it can be really hard to try to make informed decisions that aren't just made off of only emotion or only logic or only action. And one of the reasons we developed this tool was that we started to recognize a lot of the work of the great Carl Rogers, a psychiatrist, who said, the curious paradox is this: when I accept who I am, then I can change. One of the things I realized about myself, specifically experiencing a lot of trauma, significant traumas throughout my 20s, was I did not create time and space to actually sit, become introspective, and really unpack a lot of things I had been through. And this is also a lot of the reason that this tool was birthed from our team, because we want to be able to take each of these are just starting place ideas of actually identifying what you're experiencing and what's informing your perception with a particular conversation or situation. For example, if I talk with somebody for 2 hours on the phone and I only fixate on one thing that they said, in that call, and it happened to rub me the wrong way, but then outside of that 5 minutes, the whole rest of the 115 minutes of conversation was great and positive, then I need to understand, well, what is it about that comment or that 5 minutes of conversation that made me feel XYZ? And what actually was I feeling? How do I identify what was coming up for me? And that's what this tool helps do. So I just wanted to show that real quick. There's a lot of great tools out there that you can find when it comes to trying to work through your emotions and identify them. The other thing I want to do, because we are all about sharing knowledge and resources here, is to also share from one of my favorite researchers, authors, trailblazers from the 1930s. Her name was Ruth Benedict, and she's written numerous books, but one of my all-time favorites is Patterns of Culture. And I love studying not only patterns of human culture, but also civilization over time, and how that directly impacts even collective perceptions. So I want to read really quickly from this text, page 51, and just a couple quick sentences here. And she denoted Gestalt, okay? And that word means configuration. So Gestalt psychology, you can think of as configuration psychology. But Gestalt psychologists have shown that in the simplest sense, perception, no analysis of the separate percepts, can account for the total experience. It is not enough to divide perceptions up into objective fragments. The subjective framework, the forms provided by past experience, are crucial and cannot be omitted. So what she was essentially saying, what Ruth Benedict was actually saying, and she did a lot of studies all across the globe actually during her time, which was also very unheard of, not only for a female, but also she would go and live. She would live with multiple indigenous tribes, whether it was in North America, Asia, many different continents, where she was studying, and she was studying human behavior. She was studying how people interact, how our biases, our perceptions, how we experience the world impacts our communication and our personality. But one of the things, again, what I think she was also trying to say was, we cannot decide or make informed collective decisions about how we feel, who we are, our purpose, any of these things, if we only look at the fragments of what we perceive. So in order for us to actually even get kind of on the balcony, or one of my therapists used to say, become a little observer on your shoulder and watch what's happening in your body, what's happening inside of you, what's happening with your emotional state, your spiritual state. And I think it's really easy to fixate on one thing that bothers us about another human or a situation, or even media, like a song or a TV show, without doing the hard work of introspecting and asking, well, why do I feel the way that I feel about this? Why is this my thought or my reaction or my opinion about this? And I think one of the things we could all commit to doing probably better with amidst the quote unquote busyness of life is really stepping back to examine what is my perception and what are the underneath things informing this? And is it accurate? That's a really difficult question to ask because I think we all want to think we're right in situations, especially if I find myself being adverse to a conversation, for example, there's a reason why I feel that way. It could be for good reason. It might be as a protective, like, oh, this person is giving me red flags because it reminds me of XYZ past situation, and I'm going to set a boundary there. But it doesn't mean that we need to, I guess, crucify people, for lack of a better way to say it. Other than, I think there are also times when you have a perception, that perception becomes validated and it becomes true, and you know who someone is. And as the great Maya Angelou said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. So that's the other reality, is we all have the willpower to make our own decisions and decide, well, if you don't like how you're treated in a relationship, then make some decisions for how you can either improve it or how you're going to set boundaries to protect your well-being. So wanted to hop on again and really dive into what is perception and why is it important. So thank you for tuning in. Make sure you're always seeking out the resources in the comments. I also want to give a plug for our featured voices episodes. Go back and watch those. Wow, we had some incredible people. We've had Dr. Shante Barnes, Martine Kalau, Brad Klossman, the Blake Nathan, Mr. Nonprofit. Who else do we have? We have a lot of other amazing ones coming out, but those release the first of every month. And you can check them out on our YouTube page, which is also linked below. Thank you for tuning in, and let's continue to get compassionately curious together. Take care.